Ferdinand Magellan was a European explorer in the 1520s who went on a quest to find a western route to Asia and forged his path through what is known today as the Strait of Magellan. This journey further established the concept that the world was a globe, rather than being entirely flat. During his travels, he arrived at a place called Patagonia, which means land of the big feet, and reported he and his crew observed naked giants that were singing and dancing upon the shores. This encounter was documented by an accommodating Venetian scholar who went by the name of Antonio Pigafetta. In one passage he wrote, "This man was so tall that our head scarcely came up to his waist, and his voice was like that of a bull." In 1578, the same area was revisited by Sir Francis Drake, who made the same report of giant natives. The encounter did not turn out so well, and 2 Englishmen died in a skirmish. In 1592, Anthony Knivet visited Patagonia and reported men standing up to 12 feet tall. Corpses were reported to be measured, verifying this claim. John Smith, who was an earlier explorer of Virginia and the Chesapeake Bay in the year 1607 to 1609, documented his interaction with the natives. The most notable documentation was the Susquehannock Indians, who Smith documented to be a giant race of people through his drawings and his writings. He wrote, "The calf of whose leg was a yard around, and all the rest of his limbs so answerable to that proportion, that he seemed the goodliest man we ever beheld." Estimates of this proportion are roughly equivalent to a person being somewhere 7 to 8 feet tall. The intention throughout this video is to simply put forth evidence for giant humanoids and let you, the viewer, decide for yourself whether this is believable or not, rather than convince you why you should believe in such phenomenon. One source that is pointed to support the existence of giant humanoids is footprints, such as these here. Some appear man-made, such as the Hahnemann's footprint, and some do not, such as the footprint of Pinyin. These footprints are found in many different countries across the world. Could all these be a hoax or an accident? What about the case of Gregory Sporey? Gregory was a club owner in Switzerland that decided to travel to Egypt out of interest in the pyramids. He had a discussion with the hotel bartender, who said he knew a man with an old object that had been in his family for 150 years. And anyone willing to pay $300 could see this object. Allegedly, this person was from a familial line of grave robbers. Gregory's curiosity was sparked, and he went to this man, whose name was Najib. Najib showed him his possession, and Gregory took some photos of it. If a finger, I don't imagine it belonging to anything else but a giant humanoid. Gregory was even shown a document with x-rays of it. Joe Taylor, owner of the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum in Crossbight in Texas, has a display of a molded femur belonging to a giant found in Turkey. He originally requested a mold of the original femur to give to a local college professor, and ended up requesting a second copy for his museum. Joe has a biblical worldview and believes this femur is an accurate representation of King Og in the Bible. The femur is 47.24 inches long, and this would approximately make the giant's stature at 14 feet to 16 feet tall. Lovelock Cave, year 1911, in Lovelock, Nevada. 2 miners wander into the cave looking for guano for their company that makes gunpowder. The miners started removing it in layers. After a while, found unidentified artifacts. These artifacts led archaeologists to explore deeper into the cave, and they found not only more artifacts, but mummies. These bodies were determined to be burned at some point, and were mummified by the guano. The tallest bodies found had red hair, 6 phalanges, and were 6.5 to a little over 8 feet tall. Reported in the Nevada Reviewer minor newspaper, On June 19, 1931, two larger skeletons were found in the Humboldt dry lake bed near Lovelock, one being 8.5 feet tall and the other being 10 feet. The Paiute Native American tribes shared what they knew about this area, and in summary, exclaimed their ancestors fought tribes against giant cannibalistic men. The problem became bad enough for several other tribes, which gave them all common motives to work together to exterminate them. Ancient Aliens covered this story and filmed the exact cabinet where many of the skulls and mandibles were stored. One gentleman named M.K. Davis, however, claimed to be friends with a man named Domin Rowe, who took this photo of the cabinet. Where are the rest of the skulls? All the bigger skulls and mandibles are missing in the Ancient Alien show. Why is this? The book, The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, lists hundreds of articles reporting case after case of giant artifacts and giant humanoid skeletons being found under large mounds, all of which these articles are dated in the 19th and 20th century. Evidence was quickly piling up that many of these giants were of Caucasoid descent, predated the Native American Indians, and were a technologically advanced race. In the early 20th century, reports seemed to suddenly stop when the Smithsonian Institution started becoming more and more involved in these findings. The San Diego giant mummy, for instance, was founded in 1895 and toured around as the tallest man who ever lived. The Smithsonians examined the mummy in 1908, and their lab claimed it tested for gelatin on the skin, which was used as justification for it being fraudulent, even though this is barely reasonable, if at all. After the news bought this story, it was published to the public as a hoax, and the Smithsonians took the mummy away to unknown whereabouts. It has not been seen since. The book mentioned earlier had many cases, but here are some of the more intriguing articles. As one looks more into giants, you may find yourself asking how you can differentiate between someone with giantism and someone who is meant to be a giant genetically. Common genetic markers appear to be clustered together for humanoids who could be considered genuine giants. The genetic markers include double rows of teeth, proportional body and skeletal composition, red hair, and 6 phalanges. While people with giantism often have poor body posture, have a hard time moving without medical assistance, heart problems, often very thin due to thyroid regulation issues, and hormonal imbalances in the pituitary gland. These genetic markers seem to be more common in the larger giants above 9 feet. Findings discussed earlier showed this pattern as well, but here are more examples to make what I am pointing out more clear. The Kandahar giant. In the military, there is a story commonly talked amongst the community that took place in 2002 in Kandahar, Afghanistan. The story was reported by L.A. Marzulli, who interviewed 2 men from the squad that encountered and killed a giant in the desert. This squad was sent on a mission to find another squad who hadn't reported back to the commanders and were deemed missing.
We come back to the base and we started hearing this rumor about a unit that killed what they started calling this really tall person. At first I didn't think anything of it, and then come to find out that the person that they killed actually was 3 times the size of a man, had extra digits on their hand and digits on their feet, and had red hair, and a special unit had come in and wanted this target.
You were in Afghanistan in 2002, and you were called into a very remote section of Afghanistan because a patrol had basically gone missing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
There's
Well,
no
it was
villages
just around nothing.
for miles.
Right.
So it's very remote.
Yeah, very remote. So we flew in. To about 4 kilometers. We're hiking through the same area where they were supposed to make one of their checkpoints, one of their rally points. And before we'd left, there was all kinds of what happened with an ambush. But that was even odd because at the point of ambush, you would call for maybe close air support, something. Okay. There was no calls made, just off the grid. So we're coming down a mountainside, and it was a nice path, goat path. As we bent around this corner, you could see this opening of the cave. There's a cave as we're coming around. And then I see there's a lot of rocks, which is another oddity, and then bone matter. When I'm not close enough to identify what kind of bones, but I did see something I knew was a piece of our communications equipment. So instantly, we're thinking ambush, maybe animal, it could be anything. And there was enough room in front of this cave, but it had a sheer drop-off. But there was enough room that we actually got into a decent dispersal in case of ambush.
You see something coming out of the cave, and it's moving with a speed and agility that catches you off guard.
Everybody. And he comes out. It was a man at least 12 to 15 feet in height. This is a monster. Red beard, then his hair was longish, past the shoulder, a scarlet red, and Dan runs at him and starts shooting, which broke all of us into the reality. Because it was so surreal.
Now your training is kicking in.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Muscle memory, complete muscle memory. While Dan is moving at him, another bro of mine's laying down fire, and I start firing. He skewers Dan. He's now got him on this pipe. It went through. And he's still got him, and he's coming after more. We all just clicked in. I don't know what it was, but I remember we're all like, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. And our weapons components were in force. We had 308s, and we had Barrett 50s. This is sounding longer than it took. We're talking 30 seconds. And he's taking multiple hits, and is still moving.
He talked about this giant being 1,100 pounds, anywhere from 10 to 15 feet long, and it was killed. It was apparently shot somewhere in a cave in Afghanistan, but before it was shot, it lunged at several of our troops, our soldiers. It may have even gorged somebody. It was just a bizarre story, and it just sounds like the Nephilim from the Bible. And you have to assume that the giant is not alone, that the giant is not the only being living on this planet. There's got to be a whole school of them somewhere. Maybe he's got a female mate. Maybe he's got children. Who knows? Unfortunate that he had to attack our soldiers rather than be somewhat peaceful, but I guess that comes with the territory.
Dan was dead. Okay, and why is a good man, probably one of the best men I know, now dead. Before I'd left, they were already starting what they call a 9-line, which is a medevac request. They're sending out a medevac request, then all of a sudden it's not a medevac request. All of a sudden we had a helicopter show up because, like I told you, it was a large precipice and a sheer drop. So the helicopter just came up from the drop. They had dropped netting, which is like cargo netting. It's like squares. We were told we had to bundle him up. And we get another bigger helicopter, but it's almost like a Jolly Green Giant used to look back in the day that could get, through this area. Because the mountains, you gotta remember, Chinooks could only go in certain places because they had enough lift. Mm-hmm. And So we got him on there. The thing was too big. We couldn't move it. It smelled worse than a skunk. The corpse that's been around for a while.
Really fell.
Oh, it was like a combination because of the, how do you put that, the persistence of a skunk smell. But once the helicopter came in, dropped its little hook, and off he goes. The communication was sent out that we had a very large possible human creature.
There you are in the hills of Afghanistan. How many troop members are you with?
We had 6 on my crew. And when we say hills of Afghanistan, for us, we did not fly into the wilderness. We actually flew into a base. I guess this thing was transloaded out of the mountains by a CH-47. What I could see that it did have the 6 fingers. I remember taking my foot up and placing it up next to its foot, and it was extremely large. We estimated at about 12 feet, give or take. What I can tell you is the weight of the thing. Basically, it was approximately 1,500 pounds when it was getting on the aircraft. Now, if you take away the pallet weight and all the rigging that we had to hold this thing down, we figured it was around 1,100 pounds.
Of course we're upset. That's a given, okay? We lost a very good guy. But add to that, you're discussing something that even in our after action report, they're saying rewrite it. And we had to rewrite it the way they wanted.
How many fingers?
6 toes. 6 toes. And the nails were weird because if you see somebody that ever has, I don't know what it's called, but it's
like a fungus on
the nails, how they get pointy and they're like gnarly, that's what they look like.
As we showed you in the clip, the radio operator checked in and gave the report.
Religious people who believe in the Christian narrative think these giants are the descendants of Nephilim. According to the Book of Enoch, the Nephilim are a race of demigods that were the result of angels being cast out of heaven for their rebellion against God. These angels converted into devils and decided to mate with human women. Some believe this mythology may have some truth to it. Breen Forrester. An author of 15 books on ancient mysteries, he studied biology, chemistry, mathematics, and physics at the University of Virginia. Breen lives in Peru and has been a long-time researcher of Peru's history. 9 years ago, he uploaded this photo onto his Facebook page. According to Breen, the strange skull has DNA that is largely unaffiliated with Homo sapiens. The archaeologists and anthropologists that do study these findings give it the classification of Homo capensis or Homo paraka. His research in Peru has led him to believe the species could not interbreed with Homo sapiens and may have no place on the known evolutionary tree, according to an unnamed geneticist who they claim is working with them in the U.S. Since mainstream academics have not caught up, simply are too skeptical to entertain the findings, or dismisses these findings based on something more conspiratorial, people are left to speculate. Some believe these are the Anunnaki, demons, the parents of Nephilim, or something closer to human than we would like to think. The Smithsonians have been accused in the past of an anthropological and archaeological cover-up of American history that has leaked its way into the American education system. Many aspects of ancient American history is left unaddressed for unknown reasons, such as the mystery of the Anasazi and mysterious colonies of the Grand Canyon. But I will have to save that for another time. For now, I will leave this video with the professor as a final remark on giants. Thank you for listening.
Giants has been one of my favorite things to study for quite a few years, and there's lots and lots of information out there on giants. You can't find a lot in books, and for those of you who love to talk about government conspiracies and cover-ups, This is one of the biggest ones there is out there, although we're starting to break the shell. I understand that Smithsonian's starting to finally fess up to a few things because of the internet. It's getting too hard to keep things covered up. But you can find lots and lots and lots of newspaper articles dating back from the 1800s and so forth coming forward, where a lot of giants and so forth. Ohio River Valley is where a vast majority of them in the United States are found, and they find thousands of them, literally. I've got information on one graveyard where they've identified over 3,000 giants in one graveyard, and I have the coordinates and so forth. But a lot of these things get turned over to Smithsonian, and then nobody ever hears of them again. And if you go and ask them, they say, we don't know what you're talking about. This is, to me, is the best. There's a lot of books out there, actually, that you can find. This one's got tape on it, but it's called Genesis 6, Giants, Master Builders of, I got to look in here, Master Builders of the Prehistoric and Ancient Civilization. It's not cheap. You get on Amazon and that, and you're going to pay probably $50 or more for that. But probably the best one that I found on it. But to give you an idea, and I wish I could show you this on overhead, but these are showing, and they tell you the documentation where you can find information on these skeletons. But this little guy right here, if you can see him, right here, that's 6 foot tall. These are to scale, these giants that have been found. This is a 6 foot tall guy right here. Now I'd like to see, I've got photos and that of them up to about 10 foot tall. Let me show you a 10 foot tall guy. And I'll tell you what, you put a tape measure up a wall or something and try to 10 feet and try to imagine a guy there that's about 10 feet tall. This guy right here is 9 feet tall. And this one's 13 feet tall. This one over here, the big guy, 36 feet tall. If you could find something like that, I definitely want to be your buddy and I want to photograph him. Yeah, we'll put it under here. Anyway, one of the things I want to tell you about on giants that I chased, I've got a whole drawer full of pictures of some specific giants. Here in the United States, they found several in Florida, and we've actually found several here in Utah and found several over in Nevada. Those are the 3 states that I know of. There's probably more than that, but those are the ones I'm aware of. I've done quite a bit of research on the ones in Nevada, and I've got some photographs of some of the ones here in Utah. In Nevada, Lovelock Cave, if you know where Lovelock, Nevada is, out in beautiful Nevada. The city Lovelock, if you go kind of over on the west edge and then you go about 8 miles south into the desert, there's what's called Lovelock Cave out there. And there's quite a story that goes with it, and they vary some, but they're pretty close. But basically what ended up happening is, in doing a bunch of research, the Indians, and I think they're Paiutes, could be wrong on that, but the Indians that are still alive today started telling these archaeologists, as they're telling the history of their tribe, that there used to be tribes up to the north that were cannibals and they were giants, and they would come down and round up the Indians and take them back and eat them. And of course, they didn't look too kindly on that, and they were terrified by it. They were giants. They'd come down. Whenever they saw them, they knew they were down to collect some bodies to take back and eat. And so one day, one of the men in the tribe was out hunting, and he runs across a few of them, and they're living in Lovelock Cave, or they're staying there in Lovelock Cave. And so he goes back to his tribe and he says, hey, there's a group of them down here, and I know where they're at. And so the whole tribe picks up, and instead of running, they go up to where these guys are. They drive them back into the cave, and stoning them and so forth, and basically bury them up inside the cave. And so anyway, over the years, the bats get in there and everything, and all the bat guano and that falls on them, and it mummifies them. And so they still have skin on them, they've still got hair on them and so forth. And then finally, moved to modern day, and you had people go in there several years ago. Bat guano was a huge thing. If you could find enough, it probably still would be today, but probably EPA and everybody would keep you from mining it. But it was great fertilizer. And so you got somebody in there mining out all this bat guano, and they come across and they dig out these Indian mummies. that are giants. They're 10 foot tall, and they've got red hair, they've got double rows of teeth, and they have 6 digits on each hand and on each foot. And I've had people tell me, well, I've heard a lot of BS stories before, but that's one of the better ones I've heard, you know, 6 fingers on each hand, each foot. And I said, well, John Slaw went to school with me. We went to high school together. All his kids had 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. And I know other people that have had the same thing in their family. Double rows of teeth. I had double rows of teeth when I was in junior high. I can't even tell you how many times they sent me to the dentist to pull out as many teeth as I could stand at a time because I had so many extra sets of teeth. And I says, that's a genetic thing. It's not that big of a deal. Red hair obviously isn't that big of a deal. Down in Florida, guess what? The giants have red hair, double rows of teeth, 6 digits on each appendage and that. And so anyway, so they found these, and I've done quite a bit of research on it, and I found, I think, something like 37 legal archaeology digs at Lovelock Cave, probably 5 times that many illegal ones. Anyway, a lot of the bones and different artifacts that were taken out went to some of the universities which were doing the digs out of California. However, Winnemucca, the big city of Winnemucca, got some of the stuff, and I've got a whole drawer full of photographs that different people have taken. At one time they had them out where you could see them, and then when they passed the laws that you couldn't show the human remains anymore, they went in the back room. Well, if you knew they were there, you could go sweet talk some of the museum curators, go back in the back, and they'll let you photograph the skulls at least, and they had like 3 skulls. Well, and by the way, you read the stories, and is what was a favorite thing to do in the 1800s when they'd get into these, is you take the skull like it's a motorcycle helmet and you put it on over your head. These things are huge. And so I've got quite a few photos taken from different people in Winnemucca of these skulls, and they always put a mold of a normal jaw size next to them, and they're just dwarf, very small. Or put quarters out on the countertop or whatever. Anyway, it was always one of my big deals. I was going to go photograph these. And one of the guys that works for KSL right now, he's one of their head TV guys, cameraman, started doing a thesis on giants. Now, it's the second one that I know of. I read part of a thesis of a guy back east that was doing his research around the Ohio Valley, and he had a ton of good stuff. But this guy here with KSL was doing one, and so he went over to photograph him. He was going to video him because he's a cameraman, and he's doing a video thesis. And so he goes over and he says, I want to see your stuff. I'm doing this video thesis. And they said, absolutely not. They says, 2 weeks ago, the federal government came in here, told us if we ever showed those to anybody again, we're all going to prison for the rest of our life. They're shutting down the museum. They're going to quarter and draw us with horses. I mean, they'd really read them the riot act. You don't show them to anybody. And he says, well, you don't understand. I'm not local Joe from the bar wanting to see them or that. I'm doing a thesis on this, scientific thesis. Says, we were told nobody gets to see them. And he says, I want to appeal to your board of directors and that. So they assembled the museum board, and he went in and presented his case, and they said, absolutely not. Okay, that's been a couple of years ago. So here about a year ago, and by the way, every year I say, well, this summer that's real high on my bucket list. I'm going over there. And then I found out from him that they wouldn't let anybody see him anymore. And I was heartbroken, but I thought, well, if I go over and talk to him, maybe they'll at least verbally give me some information that's interesting. So here about a year ago, has it been that long since we went over? About a year ago, we went over to Winnemucca to the museum, and we walked in, and there was nobody else in the museum except curators, and there was 2 women in the back room or something, and one of them immediately came out, and she starts saying, oh, we got a car collection over here, and we got this, and I said, whoa, wait a minute. I says, I want some information on your giants. She says, I don't even know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? There's no such thing as giants. And we started in this conversation, and the more I'd talk to her, I think she thought I'd just come from the bar, or heard it from somebody at the bar or something, and I'd start telling things about the history and everything, and when she saw I knew something, then she'd change her story and she'd add a little bit to it, but well, it wasn't really giants. They were taller than, the regular Indian was 5'4", and they had a couple of skeletons that were 6 foot tall. And then I'd talk to her some more, and her story would change again. And after it changed a number of times, she finally got fed up with talking to me and figured I knew too much and that. So she walked over to a little school desk type thing, and she opened the top, and there was about a ream of paper of individual sheets, and she pulled one off the top and came over and says, "Here." And she turned around and walked away and went back in the office. So I read the paper, and it was a pre-printed thing that they were told by the federal government what to give you. That gives you this big baloney story about there's no such thing as giants and stuff, and that was it.